Training Vignette number 7. This is Scott with Dedicated Threat Solutions. And the topic for this episode is going to be visualization versus imagery. And I'm going to start off by saying, if you are doing training, but you're not incorporating these mental rehearsal techniques into your training, you are missing out on a huge component. And this is one of those skills that can really take your training and your skills to the next level. So let's hop into this. When talking about mental preparation, people routinely think about the use of mental rehearsal techniques such as imagery and visualization techniques as a training method to improve their skills. There's so much research on this that shows that it is effective and something that we should all be incorporating into our training. Attend training sessions and you'll often hear a trainer say to their students that they need to be visualizing. Oftentimes, the use of the terms imagery and visualizations are used interchangeably, but they are two different mental rehearsal techniques that are used to aid in the development of mental toughness skills and to improve your mindset. Visualization is the process of creating a mental image of what you want to happen. This technique focuses primarily on visual input and tends to exclude your other four senses. When we talk about visualization, it's usually we're focusing with our eyes. With imagery, it's a technique to enhance performance with the utilization of all of your senses to include sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. I prefer using imagery over visualization because it uses all of your senses as opposed to just using your eyes, and this provides a more detailed and realistic experience. So when you're using imagery with your eyes, you want to see everything that's going on in your environment, obviously paying specific attention to the threat, but don't get missile locked on the threat at the exclusion of all other potential threats. With hearing, you want to pay attention to what's being said. Do you hear people yelling, screaming, communicating? If you work in law enforcement, are you hearing things that your partner might be saying, transmissions over the radio? You want to use your nose for smells. Is there OC spray that's been deployed? Are there other smells in your environment? Taste, if you're fighting for your life against that dedicated threat and you're sweating and you get like that sweat in your mouth and you can taste the salt of it, you want to include all of that and make it very realistic. And kinesthetically, you want to think about touch. So using your hands, how's it going to feel to grab? How's it going to feel to punch somebody, trying to throw a punch or use a weapon against you and you use your arms to block it and you feel that smashing, maybe a baseball bat smashing against your arms, or maybe you're discharging your firearm and you feel the squeeze of the trigger, the discharge of the weapon. You want to take all of these senses that we have and incorporate them into our imagery session. So why mental rehearsal techniques? The use of mental imagery impacts many cognitive processes in the brain to include motor control, attention, perception, planning, and memory. And these are all things that we need to survive a violent encounter. So the brain is getting trained for actual performance during the use of imagery. Now this slide right here, I think is one of the most profound and powerful things I could possibly tell you. So research in neuroplasticity has shown that the use of imagery is extremely effective. According to the book Neuroplasticity by Moheb Kostandi, it says, remarkably, there is also compelling evidence that motor imagery, that is, visualizing certain movements in the mind's eye, can also enhance the learning and execution of certain skills. Thus, imagined movements appear to be equivalent to those that are actually performed, and merely going through the motions in one's mind can lead to the same kind of plastic changes in the brain. That is such a powerful statement and such an advocacy for the use of imagery. One note I have to say is using imagery is a great complement to training and practicing your skills, but it is not a replacement for it. The awesome thing about imagery is you can use it so many times in so many locations. You can be laying in bed and do an imagery session. You could be taking a break at work. Using imagery is a technique that can help you because you've gone through it in your mind over and over and over again. Now, it's not a technique that you're one and done. You have to use these mental rehearsal techniques consistently, but the research is very clear that they do help your level of performance and skill building. So again, if you're not incorporating these techniques into your daily training, it's something that you have to do. And here's the great thing. Let's say you're sick maybe you're just under the weather and you can't physically train, well, you can do an imagery session. Let's say you have an injury, you hurt your back, you have a pulled hamstring, you're laid up for a while, or maybe you had knee surgery or elbow surgery or surgery on your shoulder and you're down for a while. Well, you can still use these techniques to keep your mind and your skill level sharp. Just because you might have some downtime doesn't mean you should not be participating in either visualization or imagery. And again, I prefer the use of imagery. So there are three situations that you can use imagery that I like to do. And the first one is what we call scenario-based imagery. And this is where you go through a comprehensive scenario from the very beginning to the very end using all of your senses. So you get to be the director, the wardrobe, you get to write the script, you get to do all of the roles. This is your scenario. Examples where you can use scenario-based imagery might be a home invasion in the middle of the night. You hear something, you might start the scenario off, you're sleeping in bed comfortably, and then you hear that noise. And then that starts your whole scenario and go through everything from the beginning of that scenario to the end in exquisite detail using all five senses. And always, 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 you are going to be the one that prevails in the incident. You might be a customer at a convenience store that's being robbed. So you're going to determine what is the robber doing, how many robbers are there, what are the customers doing, how many customers are there, what is the clerk doing, are they safe, is there maybe another citizen in that store that's maybe carrying a firearm, what are they doing, and maybe you're carrying a firearm, how do you communicate to them so they don't think you're part of the bad guys team. So you get to work through all of that, and again, you always prevail. And another scenario might be where an active killer starts shooting up your place of work. A second technique is skill-based imagery, and this is used to enhance a skill that you already know how to perform correctly. And that's a key component because if you don't know how to perform the skill correctly, you're going to be practicing it in your mind the wrong way. So you have to have the correct technique and procedures down on the skill that you're going to be working on. An example of this might be drawing your firearm from concealment. So in this particular example, you would practice perfectly drawing that weapon over and over again from whatever concealment that you're using and going through the techniques using perfect form every single time. Another example might be somebody has you in a chokehold and you're going to practice getting out of it and escaping from that chokehold. And then the last one might be conducting a weapon disarming technique, and you want to go through that again using perfect form every single time, and especially focus on the touch aspect, the kinesthetic aspect. What is it going to feel like to do that weapon disarming technique? And the last one is an incident correction imagery. And this is where you take a real world example of an incident that you went through that did not go as you planned it, and you're going to use this technique to correct the incident so that you have a positive outcome. Using this technique, you get to fix any errors that you've made during the incident. And let me give you an example. So when I was a supervisory probation officer, one of the officers in my unit had to serve an arrest warrant on an offender at a halfway house. So the halfway house was on the second floor, and there was 5 of us, and we had 2 backup police officers. And I went to the door, knocked on the door. The person opened up the door, and it looked like the door was open pretty far, like almost all the way. And I had asked the guy, is so and so there? And he said no. And I was like, can we come in and check? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And as I breached through the door, the suspect that we were there for was hiding behind the door. And he was so skinny that it looked like the door was open all the way. And what he did is he just ran around me, went through all of the other officers, and ended up getting away. Fortunately, he was not a dedicated threat, so he didn't go for my firearm. That situation could have gone very bad, where he could have maybe grabbed me, tried to get my weapon, maybe grabbed me, pulled me in, and shut the door before everybody else got in, and then I'm a hostage. So it could have went really bad, but he did end up escaping from us at that point, and the police ended up having a helicopter and a police dog, and we still didn't catch him. He got picked up on a warrant a couple of months later. But that's an incident where, as an officer survival instructor, I always taught officers when the door is open, peek through the crack where the door hinges are and look through there to see if there's any potential threat. And it might not be a human, but there could be a weapon behind there, a shotgun, a rifle. And in that particular case, I made a faulty assumption. I already did a training vignette on faulty assumptions. I made a faulty assumption that could have worked really bad against me. So this is a great example of using incident correction imagery. and going over that over and over again. And I would never, ever, for the rest of my life, make that same mistake. That's the key, is if you make a mistake, hopefully there's no significant consequence associated with it and you learn from it. So one of the things I highly recommend is that you start incorporating these mental rehearsal techniques of visualization and imagery into your practice. So I have some books on Amazon. Go check those out. My contact information, email me at info@dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. Check out my website at www.dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. And please link up with me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Indeed. And I do have an Amazon author page if you're interested in checking that out as well. As always, train hard, stay safe.